Not here.
Yeah, and we thank you again for that. You know, the last time we met was mid-January, and in mid-January, we had the GOP chairman, Alan West, here to spell. Wasn't that a wonderful? I wish you could hear your applause again 2 months later. But in mid-January, when we met, we had Alan West here. He is the chairman of the Texas GOP, and he spelled out for us the 9 objectives that need to be done this year. So Ben Brown and the legislative team of the Heritage Ranch Republican Club got busy, and we have got people assigned to work on all 9 of those objectives. That applause will be taken by Ben and his team because they're the ones that are doing all the work. But the point that I would like to make with you is simply this. Back in mid-January, we didn't know that we were going to have a terrible snowstorm in February that not only caused us to cancel the meeting, but when we tried to reschedule the meeting, then the clubhouse had some plumbing problems, some pipes bursting and things like that. I'm sure Kathy Knapp can tell us all about that. But at any rate, so we never did get that meeting. But we will get that meeting scheduled back in for you, for Joan and her team that worked on that. But the point of all of this is simply this. When we had the January meeting, we didn't know about the weather conditions, but guess what? It was 80 degrees here today. It's kind of easy to forget about the terrible weather. Thank you. But the one thing that we can't forget about is what's happening politically in this country right now. So I used to say, at my age, the reason why I do this, that I am doing this, working with the Republican Club and remaining active after I thought I retired a long time ago. Caleb, you're over here. The reason that I used to say the reason I'm doing this is for my children and my grandchildren, which I bet every one of you say the same thing. But now I have to add one more thing that I really forgot to add. And that is the reason why we all do this is for love of country. I usually walk my dog through the neighborhood and I run into a lot of you. And this is the general feeling that I get from talking to all of you as I walk my dog through the neighborhood. You know, you got over the bad weather conditions in February, and we have a great spring season to look forward to. But what we can't get over is what's happening to our country and the awful things that are going on by a party that is more concerned about their voting strength than they are about what's right for our country. Therefore, we have these horrible issues down on the border, this calamity down there, where 30% of the women that come across the border today acknowledge that they were sexually molested on their journey, where the enforcement officials down there have acknowledged that the amount of drugs coming into this country from the cartels has spiked to an all-time high. And then you turn on the TV and you see some lady named Jen Psaki, and she says, we're taking a more humane approach. Well, that makes our folks angry. That makes our folks angry because none of us are willing to buy that. Now, look, I don't intend to tie up all our time tonight. We have a lot to do. I just want to make one more point, and that is simply this. By myself, I'm one guy. I can stand in my front yard, plant a yard sign, jump up and down, but I'm just one guy. But with you all here, tonight we have 164 people sitting here tonight. I feel your strength. I feel your energy. And I recognize that the only way that we can be successful and survive this ugly period of time in our history is by all of us joining together and fighting the fight together. One of us can't do it, but all of us can. The Republican Club of Heritage Ranch is near 500 members now. It's the largest Republican club in Collin County, and there are 28 of them. But we've got to stick together. We've got to join arms, And we've got to remember that this is not a fight that one person can handle. This is a fight that all of us can handle together. We draw strength from each other, we draw energy from each other, and we need that if we're going to win. So thank you. So now can I ask you all to stand? I would ask Ron Samuels, our wonderful membership director, to come up here and take us through the pledges. Please join me with the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now join the Texas. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one indivisible. Thank you. Done by a boy from Kentucky. Okay, if you would please continue to stand, and I would ask Tim Moore, another one of our board members, our secretary, to come up and give the invocation.
Almighty God, let us remember that you are the only one who can rightly lead and guide our country, and help us quell our pride so it does not get in the way of that truth. We ask that you bless our country with your wisdom, love, and compassion, and guide us to be people who pursue you and your plans for us individually and corporately. For the elected members of our local, state, and national government, we pray that you guide them to take that responsibility seriously and do their very best each day. May they realize their need for you and your direction. May they hear your voice as they make their decisions, and may they follow your guidance. May they have genuine compassion for people, for truth, and for righteousness. We ask all these things in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen. Amen.
Okay, now we have, please be seated. We have some invited guests. We have some elected officials and some candidates tonight, and I would ask for them to come up and introduce themselves at this microphone right here. And when you come up, would you please come up around this side and then turn here. And introduce yourself and let us all know who you are. And, oh, we got the first one right here. Hang on just a second. Let's do a few more up here. So we are honored by the presence of our elected officials tonight, and we thank you for your service. Okay.
Good evening. Ricardo Roy. Fairfield Council, seat 3. I'm also your mayor pro tem. Running for re-election this evening. Thank you.
Current councilman for the town of Fairview, Ken Logston, and I don't have to run against anybody this time.
Good evening. My name is Rich Conley. I'm running for Fairview Town Council, seat 1. Which was held by Charlie Hinkle. I made 2 phone calls as soon as I made the decision to run. One was to my wife, who thought I was crazy. Second one was to Charlie, who gave me his blessing. Thank you.
Hi, Coach Judge Raleigh. I'm your Justice of the Peace, and thank you so much for being here. Go ahead, hold your applause. I don't have an opponent, but I am endorsing Bob and Andy tonight. They're going to talk to you in a minute. Thank you so much.
Paul, I didn't pay you that much, buddy. I'm Bob Collins. I'm currently founding member of the Board of Trustees, current board chairman, running one more time for Collin College Board.
I just kind of spent most of my life walking around behind Bob. I'm the vice chair of the Collin College Board, seeking re-election. Appreciate your support.
Good afternoon, I'm your neighbor. I'm Constable Precinct 3, Sammy Knapp. Elected in November for my 3rd term. I'm proud to serve everyone in this community, and I will endorse our chief deputy that's coming up next for the Precinct 1 that's coming up.
An introduction. My name is Matt Carpenter. I run for Constable Precinct 1. It's going to be a year from this month, Lord willing. I currently am the Chief Deputy of Constable Sammy Knapp's office, and he never gives himself enough credit, right? Most people don't. I call him the legendary Sammy Knapp. But he runs the largest constable office in Collin County. And he's had the faith in me to guide and lead and transform our deputies in the office it is today. I want to take that and what I've learned. Sammy is it 45 plus years in law enforcement? I've been able to witness that. I've known Sammy since the early 2000s, and God blessed me with him. I'm a conservative Christian, and my wife and I have her full support, and I would love your support. Thank you very much.
Good evening, I'm your mayor, and you're listening. So I'm running for re-election. Maybe this would be my last go-round. I could do 2, but I'm going to do 1 more. I'm getting old, folks. But I am your ethical, most knowledgeable, and most experienced candidate, and I appreciate your support, and thank you, Sammy, also. This is my wife. Stand up and say hi. That's Nancy. She also thinks I'm crazy. I actually like doing this, so I appreciate your support. Have a great day. Bye.
That awful candidate that's running against Henry. And if I hadn't been defeated as a councilwoman by 18 votes with Greg Custer, I would be up here running against him. I really love being on council, and I think I love even more being mayor. I believe.
No, sir, it's okay to serve dinner, man. We're gonna have dinner, enjoy your dinner. We'll move ahead with our program here in a few minutes. So I would ask you to take this time now and get your coffee and get back to your table and get ready for our main presentation. Secondly, I would like to compliment and thank Sergio and his staff for the wonderful job that they've done tonight. Okay, as you know, Joan is our Board of Director Program Chairman, and I'm going to ask her to come up and take charge of the meeting at this time. So keep eating your dessert, get your coffee, but we're going to move ahead and stay on schedule.
He said keep eating. I'll have to talk extra loud. Because I don't like to talk unless you're listening. But I did want to say a few things. We're very pleased to have the keep eating, really. We're very pleased to have the program tonight. As you all know, when the election was finished in November, we were quite disappointed. That's an understatement. And there was a lot of discussion and erroneous things said about the outcome of the election and why. So much so that election integrity became very important all over the state and all over the United States. And it's still in the talk. And so we're very pleased tonight to have the 3 gentlemen whom you see in back of me, their faces. And they will be talking. It's a rather lengthy program because we've tried to cover 3 aspects. Consequently, we will not have a Q&A because it would go on quite a bit. But we will ask the presenters to try to stay around as long as they can with their own personal commitments to answer your questions. because let's hope they answer us, but they'll probably facilitate more questions, because that's the way it goes for a good presenter, right? So we will wait to hear from them. I did want this opportunity to say something about the future, at least the next two programs, because I think this is the only time Jack allowed me to talk. So I have to use it, right? As most of you know, or should know, that in May 1st, we will be having another election, right? This time they will be local elections. And I want to say something. Before I came to Texas over 17 and a half years ago, I always voted, and yes, I grew up in New Jersey, but I'm still a Republican from the start. But I really didn't take seriously the local elections, because I didn't quite understand that much until one of my friends was running in it, and I had to vote for him. But I didn't realize until I came here, and I think what I'm going to say has become more and more important. And I'm telling you this because our next program, which will be April 13th, a Tuesday night, and it's a Tuesday because we couldn't get Monday at the time, which I think was canceled since, but we still are stuck with Tuesday because that's what the invitation said to the folks that are coming. Anyway, they will be the elections in four areas, I want to say, but only 3 will be on the ballot. So we will be having the election for mayor. We will have the election for the town council of Fairview. And we will have the election for the board of trustees at Collin College. They will be coming. There is one more election that I will mention, and that's for Lovejoy ISD. But because the 3 people who are running are all unopposed, they will not even be on our ballot. So I did say to them when I heard that when they have the new superintendent on board, then it would be nice to invite them all here and introduce you to them, because whether you have children in Lovejoy ISD or not, guess what? Where do we pay our taxes? Right? And that's partly the name of the game. All of what we pay will go, of course, to Fairview, to LISD, and to Collin College. And for that reason alone, it's important for you and me and everyone to vote. Because I don't know about you, but if I'm paying my money, I certainly want to have a little say in who is going to be doing something with my money. And we do want good policies, and we want a well-run Collin College, LISD, and Fairview. So I'm appealing to you to come to our next meeting on the 13th and listen to the folks. Just about all of them have agreed to come. I think there is one that will not be able to make it, but the rest are. And there's another reason. When we've had some of the candidates here, like our Senator Angela Paxton, state senator, and Candy Noble, our state representative, and even Senator Cornyn, he was virtual, and Senator Cruz, and certainly Van Taylor, they always underscore, you've got to support your local candidates. That's where things start to happen. And you know and I know there are a lot of monies being spent in Texas from outside the state, from our pals in California and every place in New York and every place else, trying to get a foothold in Texas. Well, as far as I'm concerned, they're not going to get that foothold. And one of the things is, let's start with the local elections and get the best candidates that we can find into those offices. because sooner or later it floats to the top. So I hope to see you in the oncoming election, oncoming meeting, shall I say. One thing about May, we did not have our February, as John said, we postponed it twice. And ultimately we thought, well, this isn't going to work. We're going to have it come back. It was billed as about COVID. Changing it a little, change the slant a little bit. In my mind, it's reopening Texas. And that's what we're going to do. We will have the same speakers, and we may add someone else. It's in the formation now, but that's in May. So hopefully, I mean, you're a fantastic crowd here today, and we hope to see you back. We do our best to bring you the very best. Thanks. And now John is going to introduce the speakers that we have tonight.
Let's play March of the Gladiators and bring you guys up.
There you go, Bruce.
Hello. John Sefcik here. Judging by the audience tonight, in spite of COVID, election integrity is of great interest to our Republican Club members and guests. Tonight's three speakers will share their election experience and expert opinions about election integrity. This is timely because the Texas legislature is in session to address election integrity as its top priority, and many of you are going to Austin next week. We are fortunate tonight to learn what issues need to be addressed to ensure that our elections are secure and legal votes count. After our guest speakers, Ben Brown will summarize how we contact our Texas legislators to make our election security opinions known and hopefully participate in the process to enact laws that reflect our desire for election integrity. Tonight, the three speakers will address election integrity first at the polling place, second at the county level, and third at the data transmission level. Our first speaker is Kurt Hyde, holds a master's degree in systems management and has led research into computerized voting booths. He has served as an election judge and election clerk, a poll observer at the central count as well as precinct level. He will tell us how in-person voting has changed and how lessons from past can guide the way to future. Please welcome Kurt Hyde.
Well, thank you very much. You can all hear me, that's good. Thank you very much. Let's see, do I ask you to hit the next slide, or? Okay. Okay, yeah, very good, okay. I originally started out when I was teaching a computer science course at a college, but that's how I got to be the person who started the paper trail movement back in 1986. But I also began to study the history of American elections, and I suddenly said, wait a minute, I think the answers to our problems were solved a long time ago. All we have to do is just make American elections great again. But anyway, here's the voting scene. This is a lithograph from 1872. There are three security features in this picture. You know, what's right with this picture? Well, that's a nice one for a change, instead of what's wrong with this picture. But there are three things that are very much right with this picture. And I'll point them out to you because we're not going to have all day to do this. But note that there is a crowd of people. We got that? Yeah. There's a crowd of people right there. That means, you see, the elections were open to the public. There was no such thing as having to apply ahead in permission for permission to be an election observer. The public was welcome to observe. That kept a lot of fraud down right there. Notice the transparency. There was a lot of transparency, and even to the point in many cases of having glass ballot boxes. And if you look very closely, and only a handful of people have ever caught this, you'll notice that the voter himself is not the person putting the ballot into the ballot box. The voter handed his ballot to the election official, who in front of the voter would check to be sure that there was only one ballot. That was to prevent people from stuffing the ballot box. Now the next slide here is something that I bought for about $10 or $15 on eBay. It's worth its weight in gold. But this is a book which were these are actually the election laws of the state of New York back in 1871, okay? So that's what the book looked like. And it's prescribed that the very proclamation in the very beginning said the poll is open and all persons attending are to be keeping the peace and not making disturbances. But that's how they opened the polls. And the next slide, if I can separate these pieces of paper here, okay, was at the closing of the polls. So you close the polls, you hear ye, hear ye, hear ye, the election polls are closed. But then notice on page 119, the instructions to canvass the votes, that is the count of the votes. It must commence immediately upon the closing of the poll, must be public. How about that? The public's invited. What do you know? And may not be adjourned or postponed until it was fully completed. No such thing about, there's no little asterisk here saying, however, if you want to make up a story about a water main break, you're allowed to kick everybody out and then start counting when no one's looking. But page 120, the next one, on page 123 in here, they talk about the defective ballots. And notice specifically, these must be preserved and attached to the statement of results, even though they're not counted. So the public was also allowed to see the defective ballots. Now, then came the proclamation of the result. And there it was, it had to be in the public. It must make a public oral proclamation, and then it had to be like starting with each office, what was the total number of votes cast, and then how much did each candidate get. Now another form of in-person balloting was in the absentee balloting. Absentee balloting was not quite unheard of, but it was very rare in the United States. The New England, I'm talking about going back to colonial times, the New England colonies and South Carolina. Don't know how that ever happened. Probably the only time you ever heard that. But the New England counties and South Carolina did have provisions for proxy voting. And it's hard to tell by that old-fashioned language whether that proxy was a person who was your proxy or whether the proxy was the name given to an absentee ballot. But we know in some cases the word proxy referred to a voter who was empowered by you to cast your vote as well as his own. But absentee voting was frowned upon by the king, by the British authorities. Well, one of many disagreements between the colonial governments, and well, we've all heard of that war. Anyway, there was also a war called the Civil War, and that's when absentee balloting in this country really expanded. Some states authorized voting in the camps, so you'll also notice that that was still in-person voting, even though it was absentee. Back then, most of the military was federalized state militias, so if you were with the 12th Wisconsin something or other, you could all hold your Wisconsin election in your group. But the New York had this was really covered in the New York City newspapers. They decided that voting in the camps was dangerous in terms of voter integrity because of the undue influence the officers could have, and that they could have undue influence on the results. And so they said that you would go by voting by a proxy voter back home, which meant that you would write a letter, you'd have to get an officer to sign it, and you'd say that I trust so-and-so, I trust him, and have him cast my ballot as well as his, and he would cast a couple. And most of the absentee voting disappeared after the war. But absentee ballots, similar to what we know today, probably started in Kansas shortly after 1900. They had a few problems getting started with it. But by 1912, Kansas had a workable absentee voter law, and by 1914, only 2 years later, 9 states had started doing them. But even they were still pretty much in-person voting. Like, for example, in Missouri, you still voted in person. You just you had to be in Missouri in order to cast an absentee ballot. But you went to a polling place and said, well, I just happen to be from Joplin, so this is how I want to vote, and send my ballot to Joplin. And that's how it was done. But it definitely was excused absence. It had to be an excused absence. There was no willy-nilly. In the cleaning up of elections, one of them was with Tammany Hall. I don't know how familiar you are with Tammany Hall. You've probably heard of it. You've heard of Lost Weed. Yeah, there was all kinds of stuff into there. But I got again another little $10 or $15 on eBay, and I had a magazine called Scribner's Magazine from February of 1898. And it was interesting because in the article it says things like this. Well, the election dawns. It's a busy day for the police. The policeman rejoices that it comes but once a year. So I guess they have only one election per year, and it was all in one day. And he said, they've been very busy in preparatory work because every registration has been verified by a personal visit. That was the process in New York City. No such thing as filing a lawsuit saying you're suppressing voters. They'll say, hey, if they don't exist, they're not supposed to vote. What a novel idea that was. Okay, so despite the best practices and good laws and other such things, there were some pretty famous election frauds, such as the New York City frauds of 1838 and 39, where James Wentworth wrote his book confessing on it, and there was also a congressional investigation of the 1868 general election in New York. The repeater is the name given in the election fraud business for the people who vote repeatedly in election, and some of them voted as many as 40 times in a day. Boy, that is something. And these guys used to start the day with a beard and a coat and a hat, and they would go to a bunch of different places. You could do that in a major city. And then they would shave off the beard to a mustache, change their coats and hats, and go back. And then they'd shave off the mustache, and all that. There was all that stuff came out in this thing. And then in 1908, we'll go into a little more later on the grand jury in 1908, which gave Chicago quite a reputation. And however, the reports were frequently showing there were very respectable, well-known people at the top who were masterminding the frauds, while the people of lesser status acted as repeaters in other positions of culpability. The bright spot is that they usually had a formal process, and there had to be a document when anybody filed a reasonable complaint. Well, what about today? Are our voter ID laws being obeyed? No, and I happen to know a man who was a leader in the Democratic Party in Denton County, and when the voter ID laws were being passed, he said, well, that's okay, when we run the polls, we're going to run them our way. And it seems like that's what's being done, because I showed up once at a poll as an observer at an election in Denton near the college, University of North Texas, and I heard the people grumbling, saying now we have to start checking ID cards. Wow. So, another thing too that we need to be checking is how many voters are being turned away because someone else has already voted using their names during the early voting. Another question is there tampering with the election mail? And one of the things is the Levasseur versus U.S. Postal Service decision. Levasseur ran for re-election, and he found, it looked to him like all of his campaign mail disappeared and did not get sent to the voters. In addition, he found a worker from the Manchester post office who was out holding a sign for his opponent. So he filed a lawsuit, and the judge ruled, a very interesting ruling, the judge legislated from the bench that the U.S. federal law that says you cannot sue the Postal Service for negligence will be expanded to say that in addition to not being able to sue them for negligence, you can't sue them for even deliberate acts of tampering with the mail. And the judge ruled that. It was legislation from the bench. In 2010, I ran for state representative. I was in the Republican primary. I sent out campaign mail, multiple days, multiple mailings on multiple days, and somehow or other about 70% of my mail, my campaign circulars, didn't get into people's mailboxes for until election day itself, or as long as 2 weeks afterward, because I did that. And when I sent them a request for an investigation of tampering with the mail, I was told there will be no investigation. And that's very arrogant of the people at Postal Service to have said that to me. Because if you or I ever blocked somebody from reporting suspected crime like tampering with the mail, if we ever blocked somebody from contacting a law enforcement agency, we get it for interference with law enforcement, forgetting the term right now. Anyway, I don't know how much time I have left. I'll go quickly here. In 1908, the Chicago Grand Jury Report had some interesting findings. Like I said earlier, the responsible people, the brains behind the operation, were the people of high standing in the community. Many were government employees. The recommendation that they made is do not allow government employees or political hacks to run the elections. They also found that there was a shortage of regular citizens to work at the polls. They also discovered that these shortages were in many cases contrived. And then they said, and listen to this is the real solution. Use something like a jury call to recruit election workers. And then interview them to see, just like you do for a jury in here. Today, we're talking about our voting and how things are at the precinct. We have too much absentee voting. There is a federal court case, Saucedo versus Gardner, and it may end signature matching. A federal judge has ruled that people's signatures change from day to day and things like that, and so they haven't really gotten it to the point they really want it, but they've already gotten some preliminary judgments and things like that in that area. Voting centers are replacing the precincts, and the precinct is the thing that helped to keep people honest. Early voting has a number of vulnerabilities. It gives repeaters lots and lots of time to vote many, many times. Those are the repeaters. It also is a temptation for people to monkey with the stored results. We are actually getting inefficient processing of our voters, and that's causing long lines. And I bet you didn't know this, but the two largest precincts in the United States are in New Hampshire. One is Hudson and the other is Londonderry. They each have over 12,000 voters. They don't have early voting, and they process over 12,000 voters without long lines, because they do it efficiently. You walk in, instead of having a bottleneck, you walk in, if your last name begins with A through C, you go to this line, D through F, you go into this line, and they have a very efficient way of doing it. Another problem with modern voting is that people who want to be observers are really put with a burden to become an election observer, unlike how it was back in the 1870s, when you just went, you just walked on in. So we do need to have excused absence to be a requirement. The voting centers should be abolished to reinstate the precinct, get rid of early voting. We should have the efficient processing. And another thing I'll also say is that optical scan ballots are much more efficient than DREs. And with the DRE, you tie up the machine the entire time that you are voting. With an optical scan ballot, you tie it up for a few seconds, and that's it while you feed your ballot in. So, however, all aspects of elections, except for the voter mark and the personal secret ballot, everything else should be open to anybody to observe. Another suggestion that I'm making is to make it easier for people to work at the polls. Tell them only have to work a half day. It's about 7 hours. Don't allow government employees or political hacks to run the elections. Repeal HAVA and motor voter. And we need to understand Article 1, Section 4. That's the one that says Congress may at any time change the election laws and things like that. That is explained in Federalist Paper number 59. That is not a blanket authority for Congress to do anything it wants. One thing I think we should be doing in 2021 is we should be conducting a survey of our voters like that Nevada is doing, and they're finding things like they're going to people who voted and they're saying, yeah, but guess what? I showed up, somebody had already voted using my name. I think someone is giving me a signal. I think I've gone a little bit over, but in any case, we should not be allowing the governor to modify election laws. And we finally come to the last slide, if we do. There we are. Those are my two pets. I brought my two pets here tonight. I brought Ellie and Don. Ellie Funk and Don Key. And okay, I hope. Okay, thank you. And
thank you, Barry. Thank you, Barry. Very good. So now we pull the curtain back from what really goes on. So let's move on. Bruce Sherbet is our next speaker. He will address election integrity at the county level. He's been the president of the Texas Association of Election Administrators and is a certified election registration administrator. He has an elections administrator, or has been an election administrator in Dallas County from 87 to 11, and in Ellis County from 11 to 14, and most recently has been the Collin County elections administrator since 2015. Welcome, Bruce Sherbet.
Thank you. Well, Kurt, I liked your presentation because when I think back, I've held elections using every single type of technology except stone tablet and chisel. Lever machines, punch cards, optical scan, direct record, and our current system. What I want to do tonight for my part of the presentation is talk to you about Collin County, our election integrity, the things we have in place in our elections, because I'm not sure everyone knows all of the checks and balances that we have in place. Of all the counties I've worked, I can tell you this is my favorite job. And I love it because it's such a good governing body here, and the voters are second to none, the workers the best I've ever seen, and our ballot board. You're going to hear me talking about them. Neil Katz is the judge of our ballot board. They are exceptional. And ballot board is very important in our processes because they're the auditors, if you will. So if I could go to my first slide, I'll just kind of prompt you. So we use our voting system. We've had 7 major elections with it. Our first was November of 19. Last year, not only were we using a brand new voting system, we had COVID-19 and all the challenges with protections and getting everybody protected as much as possible with our system. We replaced a 16-year-old system with our new system. Next. It's called an express vote voting system. It's kind of the new technology, if you will, that's pretty much throughout this country. You have exceptions, but it's using kind of the best of both worlds technology. When I say that, it does use a touch screen. Voter gets a ballot that's coded with their precinct number and their ballot style number, not their personal information, just what ballot they are to be voting. When it's put into this express vote, it becomes a ballot marking device. And voters are voting on this machine, but it's not recording internally their vote. It's just taking their choices and printing it on a ballot that is returned. And that's one of the key notes of our new system. It provides voters with a voter verifiable paper ballot. And that gives everyone some comfort, because if you have any concerns of our processes, we can always go back to those ballots and hand count those ballots to verify them against our system. Ballots, once a voter has gotten their ballot, they look at it, if it's okay, they run it through a precinct ballot counter. It scans it, records the vote. It's the recording device and the location. It drops their ballot into a locked and secured ballot box within that unit. Curbside voting uses what we call a touch screen for purposes of getting a ballot to the car and back. And in Texas, you have to be qualified in the sense you have to be disabled from going into a polling place to vote curbside. And it's a tablet that we use for that. The poll book. Poll book's electronic. You've seen these. I know everyone here, I'm assuming, has voted. You know, first station you get to is the poll book station. And the poll book looks you up. It prints a label. That's to the left here. That label has your name, your information on it. That's the label you sign. It's put on what's called a sticker sheet. At the same time, that printer that you saw to the right there, that printer prints the coding, just the coding of what precinct you're allowed to vote, what ballot style. Ballots, if we could go back one more to the back. Ballots are very important in this system because that's the official ballot of record. And we have to account for every single ballot. If a location, for example, is given 1,000 ballots, and we have to know what's happened to those 1,000 ballots. How many have been voted? Have any been spoiled? How many are left over? It's like currency. It's like a bank auditor. We're auditing ballots. So that's a form you see for that. 4 real important categories here. This is for elections integrity for Collin County. Testing. We test so much, you'd be amazed. We code the election. We're coming up to the May 1st election. I have 33 jurisdictions on here, on this ballot. We coded the election, now we're testing the election, meaning we're running through test ballots, making sure that the equipment is counting and counting appropriately at how it should be. We know those known results. There are a number of tests we do just internal, and then we have 3 public tests. Anybody can come and watch those to watch us go through the ballot processing and getting the accumulation of the election results. Auditing. Ballot boards are really important because they are the primary auditors. But also there's auditing done at multiple levels, and I'm going to show you some of those examples just briefly in a second. Security. Security, making sure that we secure our equipment. Once it's delivered, it is secured. Keep in mind, early voting is a 12-day voting period. Last year it was an 18-day voting period because we have 6 additional days for early voting. We have to batten down the hatches at night. We open them back up. We have a way to track that to make sure everything has been secured. Custody, chain of custody, every single component. We inventory before it goes out. We know exactly where it's going, even to the media with the vote totals on it that we extract on election day to be uploaded down in our office. Next. Voting systems federally certified, state and federal. Some states just have state certification requirements, some have just federal. Texas has always, as far as I can remember back, had both. Has to go through a strenuous test. We test all of the elements of the system before, during, and after the process. All components on the voting system are standalone, and this is important to know. There's no internet connection going into any piece of voting equipment in the polling place or even in the counting station where we accumulate those results from the polling places. No connections whatsoever. They're standalone, they're independent, and that's why it's important for us to be able to secure the equipment, because access to it is the only way you could get to voting equipment in our process. Next. Okay, poll books, sorry. The poll books, they are connected because they have to be, because we have to communicate with the poll books to Election Central, to the voter registration servers. That's because we want to make sure if a voter has voted at a polling place, it immediately denotes it so that voter can't go to another polling place and vote. Like you were talking about, it updates immediately in the process. Also, it keeps a voter who has requested a mail ballot from also going and voting in person. So the poll books talk to each other, but they're not connected in any way to the voting equipment. And they have all these protections you see here. They have protections built in from outside hackers, and it only gets access to certain areas under strong protections. Go ahead. The equipment we deliver in lock cabinets called election supply cabinets. They are locked, they are sealed, they house all the equipment. Once it leaves our warehouse, it goes to the polling places. And keep in mind, early voting is a multi-day event, election day is a one-day event. And we set up the location. Each piece of equipment has the ability to lock and seal. So once we get it set up for early voting to begin day one, every single night the judges have to account for those seals. Here's an example of our seal reports. We have seal reports for everything, for the DS200s, for the Express Touch. We have it for the provisional ballot pad. We have it for the cabinets, the election judge and alternate judge. There are different parties at each polling place. They close up at night and they record and sign off on the seals. The next morning, their first job is to check those seal numbers and make sure they match what they did the night before. We provide them all the additional seals for doing that process. Next. So when you qualify and you get into the voting process, you get that label printed with your information. It goes on a sticker sheet. That sticker sheet has your signature on there. Your name also goes on to a poll list, which is the next one. So you have duplication. You have your sticker on a sticker sheet. Your name is printed on a poll list. Now this is important, next screen, because every location during early voting, every day, they record a summary of a daily report of every single activity that happened at that polling place. And it tells on this form how many votes were cast through the ballot counter, how many stickers were on the sticker sheet, how many names were printed on the poll list. The ballot board working in pairs, both parties represented, check every one of those daily report forms on a daily basis. We pick them up on a daily basis. Now, to give you an idea, we had 422,000 early voters last year in the presidential election. 422,000. We topped the state in Collin County of the highest percentage that voter. This county historically just votes early. 93% of our overall votes cast in that election were early votes, and primarily that was all in person. We had about 36,000 mail ballots too that were a part of the process. So you'll see also on election day we have the same kind of daily report form, but it's a one-day event and it lists everything. So the important part of this I wanted to express to you is the ballot board. They look at every single one of these. And if you say you have 100 stickers, you need 100 printed names, and you need that ballot counter to show 100 ballots. The ballot board, if they see a discrepancy, they write a report and send it out to the location saying, hey, this is an incomplete form or something's not adding up here. Please explain so we can have clear documentation. That's very important, especially if you have an election contest or election recounts, that you can go back and piece everything back together. Ballot board's accountability form looks like this. Each day they do this. Each team is assigned certain locations, and they account for all of those daily report forms. They look at them, they make sure they have all the provisionals, if there were any reasonable impediment, any curbside voters, how many voted, all of that's on this form. They go across the line, and by the end of the early voting period, they know what their expected totals are going to be for that location. They verified it. So when those totals are uploaded, they can look and say, yes, we're matching as we go through the process. If there's a discrepancy that doesn't match, we'll take those ballots and we'll count the ballots and run them back through high-speed counters to get that count. We have field technicians. They're assigned polling places. They may have 5 or 10 polling places. And if there's a problem at a polling place, these are highly trained technicians. They're driving vans. They have every piece of equipment that's being used in the polling place in case one breaks and needs to be replaced. They know how to repair equipment. If the location needs supplies, they'll take supplies to that location and replenish what is needed. The judges at each one of those locations have their field tech's number. So instead of someone being dispatched from my office in McKinney, they're going to be in the field. If it's Farmersville, they're going to be 5 minutes or 10 minutes away. They're not going to be 40 minutes away. That's important because sometimes you need to get there quickly to resolve an issue. And that's one of the best ambassador things that we have in place to get that done. Next. The results on election day, once they're downloaded, the media is extracted from the ballot counter, the tape with the vote totals, the poll list, all these other documents, they're put in a red bag that is locked and sealed before it leaves that polling place. There's a seal report showing that, so when it comes down to our office, we check that seal and we make sure that seal number matches what they signed off on, they and the judge and the alternate judge at the location. Poll watchers can sign it too. The ballot box in early voting and election day will always be sealed. 2 locks and a seal number recorded like I showed you. Ballot board checks that. They make sure everything looks okay. Before we upload totals at Election Central, we check those reports and make sure we don't see discrepancies because we don't want to release incomplete results or results that aren't correct. Early voting by mail. That's a topic, right? We have restricted early voting by mail. You have to be over 65. You have to be disabled, physically disabled. You can't go to a polling place and vote without assistance of some sort. And then the other thing would be expected absence from the county where we send it to you at some other location. When we get those applications in, they'll have the voter's applicant's signature. We scan that and we keep that document with the batch. When the ballot comes back in, it looks like something like this. We send a ballot packet to the voters. They pull out the secrecy envelope, the carrier envelope, the ballot. They vote their ballot, they put it in secrecy and put that in the carrier, send that back to us. We scan it in because there's a signature on the back of it. That's where we're going with the ballot board verifying signatures on these returns. Next. Voters can, if they want to, come and surrender that ballot at a polling place. Say they don't think that there's enough time to mail in the ballot, or they're not confident that it's going to get there in time. Well, by state law, they can do that. They can just come to their polling place and surrender it. When they surrender it, it's not for it to count. It's so that they can vote in person. So next slide. They have to fill out a request to cancel the ballot. That request to cancel the ballot and that surrendered ballot goes in that daily report envelope. Ballot board counts for that. They make sure that they have possession of that so that voter doesn't have the chance for that to be a double vote. If they don't have their ballot to turn in, but they requested one, they can vote provisional ballot, which is another process, and that's not counted until verified by the ballot board. You also can hand deliver to our office in McKinney. By law, state law says that can be done only on election day. If they want, now if they surrender to our office, they're not surrendering, they're actually saying, I didn't want to mail it, I want you to count it, I'm hand delivering it to you. No drop boxes used here, no contemplation of using a drop box. It comes to our office, that's what state law requires. Last year, there were more days that could be done because the governor's executive order added the additional time during early voting if they wanted to drop it off. And we had well over 1,000 come and drop their ballots off in hand at our office. And a couple thousand do it at the polling place by surrendering their ballot. Every voter that's voted, their name's going to go on a roster. And we post those daily when early voting starts. The in-person early voting gets posted daily. Any mail ballots we receive back from the voter, that gets posted. We do not post any voters requesting a mail ballot that their ballot's not back in for obvious reasons. There's a live ballot somewhere, and we don't want those voters being harassed or any harvesting or any kind of problem like that may occur. The ballot board. Yeah. Okay. The ballot board. They check those signatures on every single. We mailed out 46,000. You take off the people that turned them in person. You take off the people that surrendered at a polling place. We ended up with about 36,000 mail ballots. That's up from like 21,000 the previous presidential election. Ballot board looks at those signatures on the application. You look at the return ballot, it's right in front of them. They work in a team, both parties represented. They look to see if it matches. Under our laws, we can provide them other documents to check, and we do. Because if we have a voter registration application with a signature, which we will, they can look at that too. It's all at their disposal right there at the computers. They have the documents, the hard copies, right by them, but that's how they verify on the initial. If it looks okay and they say okay, then it goes into processing. If they say question, it goes to Neil, ballot board judge, the alternate ballot board judge, and they review it. They can take it before the full ballot board to get a consensus of accept or reject our process. And then finally, I'll just say on poll watchers, we welcome poll watchers. It's a part of the check and balance, and you'll know if you were a poll watcher, especially in our downtown, our ballot board process, our counting station. We didn't say go stand behind the glass. We let them in the room. And it was crowded sometimes. Neil looked up one time, he said, I think I have more poll watchers than I have workers here today. But it's an important part of the process. I respect it. And it is a part of that check and balance that you have, as we've just gone over all the other checks and balances. So that's my part of the presentation. I hope it was helpful to you. I'll be around a little bit afterwards if you have questions. I know we're not answering questions up here. Thank you.
To another part of the program. And my initial comment is, I can't top that at all. I'm not even going to try. But my part of the program, you have the clicker. Go ahead and click it. I want to tell you a little bit of maybe what might be resolutions to some of the issues we've heard tonight. I hesitate to do that because the action is in our legislators' hands right now. And the famous quote that I remember all my adult life is, men, guard your women and your children and your property because the Texas legislature is in session.
there's a lot of activity in Austin right now. There have been over 6,000 bills filed in the legislature. That's bills, that's not constitutional amendments, not joint resolutions, that's 6,000 bills. I tried to update some stuff this weekend and don't remember all these numbers. I've seen numbers across the weekend that over 400 bills have been filed related to election integrity. Prior to that, this past week, our working group that's working on election integrity for their club had identified over 141 bills to look at. Now, I will tell you that as of the 12th, there were 129 of those bills in the House Elections Committee, where the majority of them will be heard. As of about 3 o'clock this afternoon, that number is up to 145, and it's growing. The problem for the Elections Committee is weeding out bills, and that's one of the purposes of committees in the Texas legislature. It's to weed out the bad bills and weed out the inconsequential bills and weed out the bills we don't want. Speaking of which, you see some numbers there, 34 Republican and 95 Democrats. The Democrats started filing election integrity bills on November 4th, I think. They were gunning for changes. And if you start looking at the Democrat bills, I would just say 99.9% of those you don't want. There may be one or two that have merit. I don't know if they will all be heard in committee. That's up to the committee chair to do that. There have been more than 34 Republican bills filed. And also the House is working on one bill to contain all of those ideas. And the idea being, let's see if we can get the one bill passed. If not, we'll get 20 others passed. All of those are being heard now in the Elections Committee. And if you want, this Thursday morning at 8 o'clock, you can tune in and listen to them hear the bills, debate the bills, and decide what they're going to do about it. The good news on the House Elections Committee, there are 5 Republicans and 4 Democrats. The chairman is a Republican, Briscoe King. In the Senate, I know there have been more than 34 bills filed. Senator Betancourt filed 7 himself last Thursday that aren't in this tally. So there are more. The good news is there are 6 Republicans and 3 Democrats on that committee. And right now is the time for the commercial. Elections are important. House and Senate elections are important. And we need to do our dead level best in 2022 to elect good, solid, conservative Republicans to the House and Senate in Texas. And you see why. They control the bills in the legislature. Okay, Bob, you do the next one. What can you expect coming out of the legislature this time? Because of the Republican control of these committees and of the House and the Senate, you can expect Republican bills. Here's some of the things I'm seeing in terms of themes. Voter registration, a lot of bills on voter registrations. There tends to be a theme to give more state supervision to that process than what's there. Right now, if Bruce Sherbet asked the Secretary of State Elections Department to answer a question, he gets advice. There is no statutory authority for the Secretary of State to tell Bruce, no, Bruce, you can't do it this way. You have to do it what's in the law. There are 254 counties in Texas. Each one runs its elections differently. And if we all had a Bruce Sherbet in each of those, we would be in much, much better shape than we are. You think it's funny, but they're going to try to put some processes in to be sure that only citizens vote.
Yes.
And there are several different ways they're looking at doing that. And they're putting in processes to clean up the voter rolls. That's been an issue. Voting by mail, tightening up things is going to happen. All the Democratic bills want to loosen things up like you wouldn't believe. For example, I'll just give you one. If your college freshman enrolls in a state university, they would be automatically registered to vote. Period. Doesn't matter what. They're going to be looking at a tracking system for mail-in ballots. They'll be talking about that on Thursday. One that I'm particularly interested in is, I call it the no Zuckerberg dollars.
Yeah.
No outside funds used to conduct elections in Texas. You may not know, Dallas County received $15 million from a 501c3 organization controlled by Zuckerberg. He gave them about $400 million. Dallas County got 15, Harris County got 9 million, and 115 counties in Texas received money from that organization. If that continues, I think the county administrator is going to go out for naming rights for their election. They'll bid out the naming rights for their election to the highest bidder to see how many extra funds they can get. That's a little goofy, but that's okay. Moving on. We can move on. We're talking about uniform processes and procedures across the 254 counties. It's amazing how different they are right now. Now I'm going to shift gears. Texas is in much better shape. We're going to try to clean up some things. And I'm going to talk to Ross a little bit afterwards about some of his comments and looking at his recommendations. Now let's talk about our favorite subject, the United States Congress. They just passed H.R. 1. It's known as S.R. 1 in the Senate. For the People Act. It's a Keep Democrats in Power Act. I can't tell you how bad that bill is. Not only is it unconstitutionally bad, I've listed a few things up here. It basically gives the federal government control over our elections, which is unconstitutional, and we need to fight that with every ounce we can. As a matter of fact, your Republican Club board will be sending letters to Senator Cruz and Senator Cornyn tomorrow with a document saying, not only you vote this way, which I think they will, vote against this bill, you need to make sure all your Republican buddies do the same thing, and you need to find some Democrats to do that. So, I want to take a poll. How many of you here have friends, relatives, or neighbors, or business associates in Arizona? Raise your hand. Okay? Remember, you raised your hand. How many of you have neighbors, friends, relatives, business associates in Alaska? Raise your hand. Fewer. How many of you have those folks in Utah? Raise your hand. How about Maine? State of Maine. Okay. Do you know where I'm going with all this? There are two Democrat senators, Senator Manchin and Senator Sienna, Maine and Arizona, who say they are not going to waver, on the cloture vote, 60 vote threshold, maintain that right in the Senate and filibuster. We need to make sure they don't waver. Also, Maine, West Virginia, Alaska, Utah, 3 Republicans and a Democrat. We need to make sure those folks get letters telling them to hold the line, because we need to stop this bill in the Senate. That's what we need to do. One thing I didn't put up here, this bill is 800 pages long. One of the ideas in there is to form a commission that reviews judges' rules on this bill. To bring the judges to Washington, D.C. before this commission, and they have to justify what they've done. It's ridiculous. Let's go on, Bob. I could talk on. What are we doing? We have some working groups that are working on different aspects of the priority legislation for the Texas Republican Party. We have a group that's working on election integrity, solely on that, because it's a hot topic and very important. We need more club members to help us do that. So everybody that raised their hand, you need to come see me after the meeting and join our group, because we need to put pressure on the legislators to pass the bills that we want to pass and to kill the bills that need to be killed. So I'm soliciting your help for that. Election integrity is very important, and we need to keep that at the forefront, as well as all the other priorities for the Texas legislature. Okay, Bob, next one. Oh, am I going to do this one? We talked about this. Jones talked about the April 13th meeting for our candidate forum. That's just a reminder, so we'll click on to the next one. This is my last one. We're going to Austin, those of us that want to go. And on April 20th, we'll leave here bright and early, go to Austin, be down there late morning, and we will visit with Candy Noble, and Angela Paxton, and some of our other legislators over the course of that day and the next day. There's some optional things. You've seen the sign-up sheet that's on the table. You can go to a wine tasting tour in the afternoon, a hill country sightseeing tour, or you can go back to the legislature and talk to folks in the Capitol if you want to do that on that afternoon. But it's a 2-day visit. We did this a couple of years ago, and it was very successful. Our legislators do like to see us in Austin, and we need to be down there shoring that up. What I would ask you to do is fill out that form if you're interested in going. It's not a commitment. If you're interested in going, fill out that form and give it to Helga. Where's Helga? There she is, back over here. She will be collecting those. We have a block of rooms reserved at the Doubletree Hotel, which is 2 blocks away from the Capitol. And those blocks will be released on the 19th, so we need to know if you're going by the 17th. But go ahead and turn that in if you're interested. We'll get back with you and firm up whether you're going. It'll be a fun day. It'll be 2 long days, but I think it's very productive for you to see the legislature in action. So I think I'm through. We're ready for the most important part of the program. Clayton?
This will be short, and thank you for staying with us, but we have the website. All of you have seen it. You see it all the time, and we want to continue to encourage you to go to the website. Tonight we have 2 drawings. The first drawing will be those people who are actual members of the club. Come pick a number here. If you look underneath your name tag, you may be the winner. I'm going to call off the number,
And the number would be 294-214. If that is your number, I have a prize for you. John? Okay, we're going to let someone else have it. This one again is 294-158. 158. No one? Come again? Yeah, right. 214-154. Now you can go and play golf. It's a round of golf. That's right, 154. Okay, the other is, we have members only, and you have to sign up to get this. And this will be for a gift card. And the number that is drawn is number 16. Gary B.I.V. Email address.
Yes.
Gary and Vern.
Gary and B.I.D. That's all I had, no name.
Gary and Vivian? Nope. Go again. Darlene, I know she's here. Come on. Here's a gift card for Paul to go to Home Depot. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Ben. He's got one more thing.
I was remiss, and Maggie Whit came up and reminded me, kicked me in the shins over here and said, "You forgot me." Maggie Whit is the state Republican executive committee woman from Senate District 8. She's a sponsor of our club. She's here tonight. She has been passing around petitions for each of the election priorities. She was collecting those, and she's going to present those to the legislature at the appropriate time. So if you want to sign those petitions saying, "I support this particular aspect," you'll see Maggie, and I think Pam was helping her son, and they'll be out. But see Maggie, she's back over here waving her hand saying, come visit me. Okay, Maggie, thank you.
We have several.
Thank you. Well, we're about ready to wrap up our session. I know you all want to go home, and we're going to help you do that. Just remember, when we started this meeting, we talked about how one person by themselves is really not in a very strong position to do anything. But this room and the nearly 500 members of our club working together can get a lot done. Now just think about what Ben just talked about. We have 9 priorities. We have people throughout this room tonight who work on those priorities. And we have countless other assignments where we need people to help us put together the studies and the reviews that we need to be successful. So my final plea to you would be, please get involved in your club. It is the way for us to move forward. Finally, I would like to thank our 3 guest speakers tonight. That's a wonderful applause. But we did learn a lot, and I want to thank you once again, and certainly our audience thanks you. So have a good evening. Have a good evening, folks. Thank you again.